The Neo-Assyrian War Machine. Before the Roman legions, the Neo-Assyrians built the first true military superpower of the ancient world. In the 9th to 7th centuries BC, they fielded a standing professional army equipped with iron weapons while most of their enemies were still using inferior bronze. They were the undisputed masters of siege warfare, utilizing massive siege towers and battering rams to breach city walls. But their real weapon was psychological terror. They made horrific examples out of cities that resisted, famously flaying enemy leaders alive or impaling them on stakes outside the city gates. The message was simple: surrender immediately or cease to exist. For 300 years, if the Assyrian army showed up at your gates, resistance was basically suicide. Attila's Huns. The Huns didn't just defeat armies, they terrified entire empires. Sweeping into Europe in the 4th and 5th centuries BC, they practically fought glued to their saddles. They used composite reflex bows that could punch through armor at devastating ranges, and they mastered the art of firing backward while riding away. Roman legions, accustomed to organized, face-to-face infantry brawls, had absolutely no idea how to fight a swarm of elite cavalry that refused to stand still. Under Attila, the Huns became such a nightmare that the Romans simply paid them thousands of pounds of gold every single year just to stay away. It was essentially a protection racket on a continental scale. The Varangian Guard. By the 10th century, the Byzantine emperor had a major problem. His own bodyguards kept assassinating him. His solution? Hire a massive army of axe-wielding Vikings. The Varangian Guard was an elite mercenary force of Norse warriors who didn't care about Byzantine politics, they just wanted gold and violence. Wielding giant two-handed Dane axes, they were shock troops that cleaved through heavily armored cavalry. At the Battle of Beroia, when the Byzantine army couldn't break a wagon fort, the emperor sent in the Varangians, who simply chopped the wagons and the defenders to pieces. The Mongol Horde. Genghis Khan's army was less a military force and more a natural disaster. Every Mongol warrior was an expert horseman carrying multiple bows and up to 100 arrows. They organized their army using a strict decimal system, scaling up to massive units called tumans of 10,000 men. Their signature move was the feigned retreat. They would pretend to flee in panic for days, drawing the enemy out into a stretched-out, exhausted line before suddenly turning around to slaughter them. When the Khwarezmian Empire foolishly executed Mongol envoys, Genghis Khan didn't just defeat them, he practically erased their civilization from the map. The Spanish Tercios. For over a century, the Spanish Tercios were considered invincible. Dominating European battlefields from the 16th to the mid-17th century, they perfected the dreaded pike and shot formation. A tercio was a massive, highly disciplined square of up to 3,000 men. Pikemen stood in the center to stop cavalry charges, surrounded by musketeers who would pour fire into the enemy lines. If you charged them, you ran into a wall of 15-foot spears. If you stood back, you got shot to pieces. For 150 years, the tercio was the undisputed king of the battlefield. The Comanche. The Comanche were the undisputed lords of the American southern plains. While Europeans were conquering the Americas, the Comanches stopped the Spanish Empire dead in its tracks. They learned to ride horses before they could even walk. A Comanche warrior could hang off the side of his galloping horse, using its body as a shield while firing a dozen arrows, all before a Texas Ranger could reload his musket once. They didn't just fight, they launched brutal, lightning-fast raids that terrified settlers and rival tribes alike. For over a century, no one crossed Comanche territory without their permission. The Zulu Impi. In the early 19th century, Shaka Zulu completely revolutionized warfare in southern Africa. He threw away traditional throwing spears and armed his warriors with a short, deadly stabbing spear called the ikla. He introduced the brutal bullhorn formation. The heavily armed chest engaged the enemy head-on, while the highly mobile horns sprinted around the flanks to trap them. At the Battle of Isandlwana in 1879, a Zulu force of 20,000 warriors used these exact tactics to completely outmaneuver and wipe out a modern British column. They proved that unmatched speed and discipline could break a technologically superior army. World War I Canadian Corps. Today, Canadians are known globally for being exceptionally polite, but in World War I, they were arguably the scariest troops on the Western Front. The Canadian Corps earned a reputation as the British Empire's elite shock troops. They became the absolute masters of trench raids, slipping into enemy lines in the dead of night with trench clubs and knives to gather intelligence and wreak havoc. They were so aggressive that German intelligence actively monitored their movements. If the Canadians were moved into your sector, a massive offensive was coming. To the Germans, they were trench-raiding sleep paralysis demons. The French Foreign Legion. Created in 1831, the French Foreign Legion offered a clean slate to outcasts, criminals, and runaway foreigners, provided they were willing to march into hell for France. Their reputation for fighting to the absolute last man was cemented at the Battle of Cameroon in Mexico in 1863. Captain John Danjou, a veteran with a wooden prosthetic hand, led just 62 legionnaires against roughly 3,000 Mexican troops. Retreating to a walled hacienda, they fought for nearly 11 hours. When they finally ran out of ammo, the last 5 survivors fixed bayonets and charged. Turns out, giving men a second chance makes them terrifyingly loyal. British SAS. Founded by David Stirling in 1941, the Special Air Service proved that 5 guys in jeeps could do more damage than a massive bombing raid. Operating deep behind enemy lines in North Africa, they navigated the featureless desert to sneak into German and Italian airfields at night. They would simply drive right down the airstrip with twin machine guns blazing, shredding enemy planes and equipment in sight. In just over a year, the SAS destroyed over 300 Axis aircraft on the ground, more than the Royal Air Force managed to shoot down in the same theater. They practically invented the modern Special Forces raid.